What's going on, guys? Doomwake here, and welcome back to another episode of Watching the Meta, the weekly series where we take a look and see what everybody played on Magic Online in the challenges this weekend for Pioneer, Standard, and Modern. And when applicable, we also happen to take a look at some paper results. Spoiler alert, those will be applicable this week. There may have been a Pro Tour that happened this past weekend. And then we take a look and see if there's any big shifts in metagame in terms of decks moving in certain percentages from week to week. Maybe there's some trends we can identify. And at the very end of all of it, we take a look and see what the spiciest decks that came out of the weekend. And we are going to kick things off, as we always do, with Modern. And I've been saying it for the past couple of weeks, and I'll say it again. Modern is just the best format right now. Both Standard and Pioneer have some issues. We'll just leave it at that. I can't really speak on behalf of Legacy and Pauper just because I don't interact with those formats at all. I saw some comments in the last video about like, hey, Pauper's the best format, and it might be. I'm willing to believe that you are correct. It's just a format that I don't particularly engage with yet. I'm not going to say no for the future, but for now, I really like Modern. I think it's the healthiest metagame. The gameplay is great. Boros energy is even decreasing week to week. 15.6 last week, down to 12.9 this week. From there, Brood Scale combo 8.5, Affinity 5.8, and then from everything else is just like 5 to 6% or less. You could not ask for a more diverse metagame. Now, you could argue maybe the gameplay isn't what you would prefer, right? Stuff like Mono Blue Belcher, sometimes Bird Scale combo, Amulet Titan. There is a lot of decks that sort of can feel like you don't really have a chance sometimes, and they just kind of kill you on turn 3 or turn 4. Ruby Storm, another example. But there's plenty of ways to hate those decks out. There's plenty of cards that are good against Amulet, Storm, Belcher, any sort of all those combo decks. You just have to make sure that you're prepared for the right ones. Yeah, I mean, with the decline in Boros, it doesn't surprise me to see Belcher go down a little bit from 6.7 to 5.4, but nothing too noticeable. And yeah, I don't really have a ton else to say. Just kind of play whatever the heck you want. That's the beauty of Modern right now, is you can kind of just play anything and you can still easily win a tournament. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at some spicy deck lists, excuse me. And boy, do we have some spice for you this week. So the first deck we are going to start out with is from username Walry. And that fourth place next to their name is not a typo. That is a challenge top 8, and they played a 69 card Umori Sorcery Coffers deck. I don't know if there was a meme going on. There was maybe perhaps a wager in place and somebody said that they could never top 8 a challenge with 69 cards. Nice, by the way. And they proved them wrong. So you have what you would normally expect, like Cabal Coffers, Urborgs, ways to tutor Cabal Coffers, like Sylvan Scrying, Profane Tutor, Pillage the Bog, a lot of discard spells, Dreams of Steel and Oil, Inquisition of Kozilek. The Thoughtseizes are in the sideboard, which is a little interesting. We have 4 Duress and 4 Thoughtseize in the sideboard. A bunch of tutors, as we mentioned, Dark Petition and Profane Tutor. And then just a whole bunch of banger one-ups. Culling Ritual, Damnation, Dread Fugue, which I guess is just a discard spell. Gaze of Granite, destroy each non-land permanent with mana value X or less. Go Blank, Mind Sludge, discards a card for each swamp you control. Sweepers like Path of Peril, Strategic Betrayal. And then 4 Resentful Revelation, from new card from Final Fantasy here. And then finishing off the game with stuff like Titania's Command and Torment of Hailfire. This deck is just a work of art. Absolute beauty. Belongs in a museum somewhere. And I don't know, if you like playing memes, 69 cards, doesn't get any better than that. On a slightly more serious note, let's take a look at Inferno 2050 in 14th place. This is mostly your traditional tried and true Domain Zoo deck. Flage, Ragavan, Scion of Draco, Territorial Kavu, Leyline Binding, Leyline of the Guildpact, Bolt Stub, Tribal Flames. You've seen all these cards before. The biggest issue with Domain Zoo is its lack of playable one-drop. And I know you're going to yell at me in the comments, Wild Nacatl is not a playable card in 2025. Okay? I'm just going to say it right there. They hated him because he spoke the truth. Wild Nacatl it just doesn't cut the mustard. So people have been trying to find some other ways. I saw a list on Twitter that had Saz's Chocobo, which kind of, I guess, works with all the fetch lands, but this user decided to try out Cecil Dark Knight as our additional 1-drop of choice. And I don't hate that. 2/3 Death Touch, so it can trade up with some of Boros' 3-drops like Flage or something like that, although I guess they just kill him with Flage. Because this deck has a lot of fetches and shocks, right? You have 12 fetch lands and a whole bunch of shock lands. When you don't have Leyline plus Scion and all of your creatures have lifelink, you naturally just deal yourself a lot of damage. So it's actually really not that hard to flip Cecil in the games where you don't have Leyline plus Scion, because let's be honest, you're winning those games anyways. And on top of that, they also play Thoughtseize in the main deck, which is more ways to lose life for Cecil. So you can imagine if you go Fetch Shock for Cecil, and Fetch Shock Cecil, turn 2 Fetch Shock Thoughtseize, that's 8 damage. You attack with Cecil, that's 10. You already flip Cecil on turn 2. So, interesting idea. I guess I like it better than Wild Nicodle. Okay, let's go back to meme territory a little bit. Not quite 69 card coffers, but we do have Kristoff here in 31st place. This is not coffers. It's more of like a Golgari Jund Saga type deal we have going on, where you have, I guess there's only 2 Urza Sagas, but basically, a lot of interaction: Inquisition, Thoughtseize, Fatal Push, Edict, Shoot the Sheriff. Brand new card from Final Fantasy, Dark Confidant. You got 4 copies of Masked Vandal here. 2 mana, 1/3 ETB, exile a creature from your graveyard, exile target artifact or enchantment an opponent controls. Pretty good against Urza Saga. And then, the kicker here, 9 copies of Nazgul. And there's not really like Aether Vials or Thrumming Stones or any way to cheat them into play. We're just hard casting Nazguls. If there's something I'm missing, there's something I'm missing, but we're just hard casting them. 3 mana, 1/2, when it enters the battlefield, the ring tempts you. Ring tempts you, put a counter on each Wraith you control, and then a deck can have up to 9 cards named Nazgul. Good joke. Yeah, cool looking deck list. We're really just trying to find the memes this week, I guess. Okay, last one I have for you for Modern. Less of a meme, I think. I think this one maybe has a little bit more legs to it. So MDV Win in 7th place. So that is a secured top 8 for MDV Win. And they were playing Infect with 4 copies of Tifa Lockhart. So Tifa, very powerful creature, 2 mana, 1/2 trample, landfall. Whenever a land you control enters, double Tifa's power until end of turn. And it turns out there's a lot of good pump spells in Modern, a lot of which give +4/+4. Notably, Might of Old Krosa, if you cast it in your main phase, +4/+4. Groundswell, landfall, +4/+4. Vines of Vastwood, if you kick it, this is 2 mana, +4/+4. And Scale Up, which is 1 mana, until in a turn, target creature you control becomes a green worm with base power and toughness 6/4. So, if you scale up your Tifa, then you play a fetch land, Tifa goes to 12, you crack the fetch, Tifa goes to 24, and you attack your opponent for 24 trample. And then outside of Tifa, we also have some infect threats, right? We have 1 copy of Glisten Elf that we can tutor up with Green Sun Zenith, and then 4 copies of Inkmoth Nexus. So there's actually, deck is pretty light on threats, but also remember, you can and probably will sometimes just kill people with Hierarchs, because the Exalted stacks up, and then again, you have so many ways to pump. But yeah, interesting deck list, 1 Safekeeper to tutor for to protect your creatures, and there you go. So that is going to do it for the Modern section. Let us go ahead and transition over to Pioneer. And here's what we're looking at for Pioneer. Yeah, maybe red is not only a problem in Standard? Question mark. I will say, as somebody who has not played a lot of Pioneer over the past couple of months, it's hard for me to tell if the red deck is actually a problem. I have heard some complaints on Twitter, which there's a lot of those out there, but I've heard some people say that the red deck is a problem in Pioneer, that something's got to go, whether it be Rage, or I've even heard Sunspine Links, which sort of makes sense in a format like Pioneer where you have a much broader spectrum of like dual lands and 3 and 4 color decks you can play, and Sunspine Links really invalidating a lot of those strategies. I can kind of understand that. I would love to hear your guys' thoughts in the comment section down below. I'm going to be doing a separate ban video that should be going out tomorrow, so maybe we'll save that discussion for there. But in any case, mono red going from 25.6 to 27.5, it's still the most played and probably the best deck in the format. Izzet Phoenix from 8.1 all the way up to 14.4. So more people deciding to play Phoenix this week. Mono black, a little bit down from 10 to 6.9. But that's because there is a new version of Mono Black, which if you take a look at the very top of the bar here, Mono Black Legends at 6.3%, that was not a deck last week. This is something that popped up in one of the challenges early on in the week, and that a lot of people just jammed it in the challenges over the weekend as well. So we're going to take a look at that deck list. Don't worry. From there, you have Lotus Field Combo, Boggles up a little bit, Orzhov Monument up significantly. That was another one where, if you recall last week's episode, we did take a look at that Orzhov Monument deck from WCL. I think they top 32'd every challenge this weekend with it, and there was a couple other people that played it as well. So that deck is pretty sweet. Rakdos Demons up a little bit from 1.3 to 4.4, and that's pretty much it. Everything else appears to be kind of stable. So big uptick in Phoenix, big uptick in Mono Black Legends, big uptick in Monument. And that's kind of cool because those are, well, outside of Phoenix, the Mono Black Legends deck and the Monument deck, very new decks. So it's cool to see that Pioneer still has enough innovation to where decks can kind of sort of come in every single week and maybe try to compete with the big dogs. Enough about that. Let us take a look at the spice. And I got a little bit for you this week. So first off, we are going to kick things off with, if you took a look on the challenge, let me actually just go back here. So I did label it as Jund's Sacrifice on the winners, and that was a small mistake. It's actually Golgari Sacrifice, so don't yell at me in the comment section. Shout out to Darkbone, who won a challenge with some Final Fantasy cards. So Golgari Sacrifice, the stuff that you're probably used to in decks like this, where you have Cauldron Familiar, Gilded Goose to make food, Yigra, Eater of All to pair with the Cauldron Familiar to go infinite, and then I guess some relatively new cards like Dredger's Insight you don't see in a lot of these sacrifice decks, but it can find artifact creatures or lands, so most importantly, it can actually find you copies of Witch's Oven and while milling over Cauldron Familiars, so that's kind of cool. Couple of Trail of Crumbs to pair with the Geese, and then a whole bunch of interaction, Push, Abrupt Decay, and some Deadly Disputes. A lot of this stuff you've probably seen before. New cards here, we have 2 Albed Salvagers and 2 Sephiroth Fabled Soldier. So what's interesting about Salvagers compared to Sephiroth, because normally you would probably assume that Sephiroth would be the better card. It has an enter the battlefield and an attack trigger, it draws cards, so on and so forth. The very important thing about Salvagers is it also triggers off of artifacts, which is huge. Because when you're going through the Witch's Oven loop, every time you go for Oven with Cat, you go use the oven, sacrifice the cat, make a food. Sacrifice the food, bring back the cat. In that particular loop, Sephiroth would only trigger once. The Salvagers, however, would trigger twice because you're sacrificing the cat and the food token. So that is something important to note. And also works with stuff like Deadly Dispute when you get the treasure token, Gilded Goose, Trail of Crumbs, all that kind of stuff. So, interesting take on the food archetype is skewing the red, which I don't hate, and maybe this is something that I would consider giving a shot. As promised, here is the aforementioned Mono Black Legends deck. So, it is a Mono Black aggressive deck that the threats here are Cecil, Dark Knight, Dark Confidant, so good amount of Final Fantasy cards here. Deep Cavern Bat, Gifted Aetherborn, Gix, Yawgmoth Praetor, and Tiny Bones. Tiny Bones is an interesting one. It is only a 1-mana 1/1, but it has Death Touch, so it can trade up. And more importantly, it is a 1-mana legend that turns on Mox Amber, which there are 4 copies of in this deck. And then just the good interaction. Thoughtseize, Fatal Push, Go for the Throat, 1 Copter. I've seen some lists that have more Copters. I think there was another one that was minus Aetherborn plus Copter. But for the most part, these decks are pretty much the same. And it's super clean. Like a lot of these cards, if I told you there was a Mono Black Legends deck, these are the cards that you would expect to be in a deck like this. So, looks pretty cool, looks pretty clean. And if I were to play some Pioneer, this is probably the deck that I would want to try out next. It looks really good. And last up for you here, we got a spicy one from Tybalt of Red Sub, just narrowly missing out on top 8 in 9th place. Now, for people who pay attention to Modern, more specifically the people that are involved in the Mill Discord. Tybalt of Red Sub is a name that you probably recognize. This is an individual who plays endless amounts of Mill and Modern, and they do really well. They continuously crush with Mill and Modern. They have put a lot of work into the archetype, and they have taken their talents to the Pioneer Mill archetype. I guess, well, they're making the archetype now because nobody's played this before. So what I want to draw your attention to is the Water Crystal. So this is a 4-mana artifact. It says blue spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. And the other line of text that's important here, it says, if an opponent would mill 1 or more cards, they mill that many cards plus 4 instead. Keep that in mind. Now, I want to point you to Sphinx's Tutelage. Apparently there's a promo version of this. I didn't know that. But this is a 3-mana enchantment that says whenever you draw a card, target opponent mills 2 cards. If 2 non-land cards that share a color were milled this way, repeat the process. So, if we go back to the Water Crystal, remember, every time they mill 1 or more cards, they mill that many plus 4. Tutelage says, whenever you draw, they mill 2, which in this case would actually be 6. So every single time, if you have both of these cards in play, every time you draw a card, they mill 6. And of those 6 cards, if 2 of those cards share a color, they mill another 6. And then if 2 of those cards share a single color, they mill another 6. You see where this is going, right? So normally, tutelage is kind of hard to work because you have to get very lucky and mill over. You're only milling 2 cards. They have to share a color. But it's a lot easier to do that when they're milling 6 at a time. So that's kind of the combo that we're going for. We have a lot of ways to find the combo pieces like Thunder Trap Trainer, Stock Up, Treasure Cruise, a lot of interaction, Thoughtseize, Fatal Push, Go for the Throat, more cantrips with Consider and Opt to trigger tutelage, and that's it. It's combo, cantrips, removal spells. Very clean and simple deck list. I'm gonna have to give this one a try. Not entirely sure that you have enough time to set up the combo, but again, with the good interaction like Thoughtseize and Fatal Push, maybe you can actually just get there. So with all of that, we are done with Modern, we are done with Pioneer. That means we have one format left to go. And before I show you the graphs, because it gets worse than this, trust me, this is the Pro Tour that took place this past weekend. Pro Tour Vegas, I think. They're in Vegas, right? And Izzet Prowess was the most played deck at the tournament. Wow, I'm surprised. Shocked Pikachu face. Editor, give me like a Pikachu thing here. 42.3% of the metagame was Izzet Prowess. Next deck, not even half of that. Azorius Omniscience, 19.9. Mono Red, 10.9. And then from there, it's you're less than 5% already. For Math Wizards at home, 42 plus 19, 52, 61. That is 72% of the metagame in 3 decks. That's just for the Pro Tour, okay? Remember how I told you it gets worse? That's because it does. The metagame, I can't even, I don't even know what to say. When I was doing the data for this one, I was having a hard time, just not laughing. You look at this and you can't help but laugh. 34.9% of the top 32s is a Prowess, 33.3% Mono Red. Again, if you add those two numbers up, that is 68% of the format is 2 decks. If you include Omniscience, that's almost 80% of the format is 3 decks. Even when I'm saying it out loud, there's nothing else to say at that point, right? Dimir Midrange 4.7, Domain 4.2, Orzhov Pixie 1.6. Is it Cauldron? Shout out to PV 2.1%. We'll look at his deck in a second. Yeah, I mean next Monday, June 30th, can't come soon enough. As I said earlier, I'm going to record a ban list video. I'm recording this now. I'm going to record the ban list video after I make this video, and then that'll be out tomorrow. Yeah, we got a lot to talk about tomorrow's video, so be sure to check that one out. But, I mean, even amidst all of this, we still got some spice to look at. And we are going to start the spice off with birds! Caw-caw, caw-caw, caw-caw! Shout out to Puff Sun, 31st place. I believe that I think that's Grayson Nemitz. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, who is just an absolute killer on the Energy series. But Puff Sun decided to bring some birds to the prowess infested waters. I guess birds don't go in the water. Maybe there's something there. I don't know. It's birds. So we have Bartz and Boko. This is kind of the big, like, at least in my opinion, one of the big payoffs for playing a deck like this, where you just get a 2-mana 4/3 that says enter the battlefield, destroy a creature. That's a pretty sick rate. We have Choco, Seeker of Paradise. This is a 3/5 that lets you look at a bunch of cards, put a bunch of lands into play, put the rest into your graveyard. That it itself has landfall, gets +1/+0. Saz's Chocobo, landfall, put a counter on it. Traveling Chocobo, this is kind of what the deck is centered around to an extent, where you can look at the top card of your library, you can play lands and birds from the top of your library, and every single time a land or a bird entering the battlefield causes a trigger to happen, that trigger happens again. So you get double landfall off Chocobo, double landfall off Choco, double trigger off Bartz and Boko, so that's pretty good. You have side quest raise a Chocobo. I can't flip the card in this for some reason, but basically this is a 2-mana enchantment. When it enters, you make a 2/2 bird that landfall gets +1/+0, and then on your first main phase, if you have 4 birds, you can flip it. It itself flips into a 2/2 that says landfall, all of your birds get +1/+0, and when it transforms into it, you get to search for any land and put it into play. So this is effectively 2 mana for a 2/2 that pumps itself and a 2/2 that pumps your whole team of birds. I've seen a lot of people not play this card in their birds deck, and I don't know what they're doing. This is every single time I've played the birds deck, this has felt like by far the best card in the deck. So I love the 4 side quests. That's a good call. And yeah, that's pretty much it. You got some sideboard, sheltered, high noon, all the anti-prowess stuff. I guess the Valley Quest Callers are kind of a shout out, where itself is not a bird, but it does pump all of your other birds +1/+1 and gives you some scries. So that's kind of cool. But yeah, it's bird season. Well, at least maybe after the ban list. Next up here, I want to take a look at this deck from Claudio. This is actually a deck list that was submitted by Brian Hones, aka Vayvale. We actually uploaded a video with this not too long ago. I want to say it was Thursday or Friday of last week. And this is a deck that Brian played at the Pro Tour. And we talked about this deck when I played it last week. I still think this is the best looking unit deck that I've seen so far, where it's not really playing that many big summons. There is one, but you're not overloading with like multiple Knights of Round, multiple Bahamut, a bunch of Overlords. Really, the only Overlord we have is Boiler Bilges, which is probably the single best one with Yuna, because when it enters the battlefield in your end step, you get the lifelink off of the damage. One card that I really haven't seen in a lot of these Yuna decks before Brian's is the Elder Dragon War. This card is awesome because it helps you survive, right? It helps you stabilize with the 2 damage. It lets you discard bigger enchantments to get back with Yuna, and then it naturally goes to the graveyard itself while making a 4/4. So if you just play the Elder Dragonborn on Chapter 2, you can go next turn, Chapter 3, it dies, then you go land 5 Yuna, get it back, make another dragon. Really just gives you a lot of flexibility there. I mean, need I say it? 4 copies of High Noon main deck. This is just the format that we're playing in. That's probably not going to happen after next Monday, but we'll get there when we get there. But yeah, I don't know. This is a very interesting take on the unit deck. Couple of Screaming Nemesis in the main deck too, just because this is the only card in Standard that is legally allowed to declare a block. So maybe there's something here when we can take a look at this when the ban list rolls around next Monday. But cool looking lists. Again, this is Claudio, but cool looking list from Brian. And I don't remember exactly how well he did at the PT, but yeah, cool looking list nonetheless. And then a massive shout out to Paulo Vitor Damo de Rosa. This is not who that is. Karate Dom is not Paulo Vitor Damo de Rosa, but this is the list that Paulo played at the Pro Tour. And funny enough, it already won a challenge. And not just that, if you look at second place, there was a 75 card mirror in the finals of the challenge. So Paulo definitely did something right. This list is a banger. So basically the idea is you're utilizing Vivi or Nitier with Agatha's Soul Cauldron. You put Vivi under Cauldron, you use the Cauldron to put counters on your creatures, and all of those creatures can make a boatload of mana off the Cauldron VV ability. You have Voldaren Thrillseeker, another powerful card that not only is good underneath a Cauldron, but is good at putting counters on your VV to make more mana to then sacrifice and kind of go from there. You have Proph's Eidetic Memory, which is insane with VV, because if you play a big draw spell, you can then use the Prophs to put counters in the VV. Post-combat, you can make a boatload of mana, cast more draw spells, find Thrillseeker, and you kind of get the idea. There's a lot of ways to keep going with this deck. But what I like about this compared to the more combo-focused versions is it's kind of just a normal aggro deck. Mako, Fear of Missing Out, and Tursa, you're not super all in on just getting Cauldron VV and assembling that with like Town Talent and going off. You can just kind of kill people with Mako into Fear and Profs with Tursa and Winter Night Stories. So I like that aspect as well. Really cool looking list. It clearly has some merit because there was a mirror batch in the finals of a challenge, and I've heard some other people doing well with it. So big shout out to Paulo, and I think Paulo might have requalified for the next Pro Tour. Don't quote me on that, but really good to see Paulo at these types of events. And last but certainly not least, from Ely Cassis, I think Ely made a top 32. Yeah, got 19th place in the event here with Golgari Roots. One of the only people not playing Prowess, Mono Red, or Omniscience in the top 32. I think there was 5 people who weren't playing one of those 3 decks, and Ely was one of them. So what new cards did we get from Final Fantasy? Well, only 2 copies of Town Greeter, but there is some interesting things about this deck list that I think a lot of people maybe didn't necessarily expect. So, funny enough, he has 2 copies of Dragon Sniper in the main deck, and 2 more copies of Dragon Sniper in the sideboard. For those of you who don't know, this is a 1 mana, 1/1 Vigilance Reach Death Touch. And it just so happens that that's kind of one of the best cards against Prowess, because they have to trade for it in some fashion, right? They either have to use a removal spell on it, or they have to trade one of their Prowess tokens for it. And because this deck just has the ability to rebuy it over and over and over and over again, with stuff like Overlord of the Baelmark and Tyvar, you can just continuously keep getting it back. They feel like they're in this position where they like either don't want to attack into it until they find a removal spell, but that buys you a lot of time, or you just start mowing down their creatures because they feel like they have to trade with it. So that's kind of cool. 4 copies of Molt Tender, 4 main deck Haywire Might, the 2 Town Greeters, 2 Rebel Belt, 2 of the Adepts to go infinite with like Tyvar, Roots, and things like that. 4 Roots, 2 Dredgers, Insights, only 1 Cauldron, 2 Cash Grab. You can tell these numbers were tested quite a bit. You can tell that based on the look of this deck list, Ely spent a lot of time here. I lied, there are 3 Dark Confidants in the sideboard, so more Final Fantasy cards for the grindy matchups. But yeah, really cool looking list from Ely Cassis. Again, something that's worth looking at maybe after the June 30th ban announcement. And that, my friends, is going to do it for another episode of Watching the Meta. Next week's episode is going to be weird because the weekend challenges will happen before the ban list. So maybe what I'll do is just skip standard for next week because it's probably just going to look more like this. But in any case, we'll be back next week. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed the content, please consider subscribing to the channel, like the video, drop a comment in the comment section down below, and I will see you guys in the next one. Adios.